Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you folks tonight. Good evening, counselors. My name is Camille Labchuk. I'm an animal protection lawyer and the executive director of Animal Justice, which is Canada's only national animal law organization. We work to make sure that animals have the legal protections that as a society we agree that they deserve. We have tens of thousands of members and supporters from across the country, including many in Orangeville, and we really appreciate the work that you're doing on this issue and the opportunity to provide you with some comments. So first of all, we commend you for considering a ban on sales of cats and dogs and rabbits. As others have pointed out, by this point, outlawing the retail sale of companion animals is becoming quite widespread across the country in North America and Ontario in particular, with cities adopting some version of a ban, including major centers like Toronto, Newmarket, Mississauga, and Ottawa. Banning commercial sales of companion animals has many benefits. It first of all helps us treat animals not as just commodities that can be bought and sold, but as the family members that most of us consider them to be. It also helps crack down on puppy and kitten mills, and rabbit mills for that matter too. In Ontario and nearly every other place in the country, tragically, breeding of animals is not regulated. There's simply no rules and no inspections by the government of a dog, cat, or other breeding facilities. And in fact, there's not even a requirement that these facilities register with the provincial government so that we even know where they are. The new PAWS Act did come into effect last year. It may eventually regulate these facilities. We don't know because they're still creating some regulations, but it currently does not. So at the moment, its standards are not any different than the previous OSPCA Act that was in effect before. So I suggest to you that it's probably not the best idea to look at the PAWS Act as a solution to any of your concerns about animal welfare. As Mr. Laidlaw pointed out, it's quite good at reactive situations and addressing people who kick a dog or abuse a cat, but it's not great at preventing abuse and creating that regulatory system we need to oversee animals that they're being treated well. So without regulation of breeding, this unfortunately means that backyard breeders have proliferated. People breed animals to make money, and so it's not surprising then that the well-being of animals is not always the primary concern, and sometimes the conditions that animals are kept in these closed-door facilities that nobody knows about are appalling and often illegal. But the only way law enforcement can ever take action is if they receive a credible tip that there's a puppy mill or a kitten mill going on. And that's again because there's no registry or any monitoring of these types of activities. And you've all seen the images, I'm sure, but what enforcement authorities find when they do get to bust a breeding operation is often pretty horrific. There's animals with severely matted fur who've been left to wallow in their own urine and feces, often overgrown toenails, serious physical injuries, blindness, skin problems, breathing problems. So the sale of pets contributes to the demand for these animals and helps breeders who engage in these practices. And that's why it's so important that what you're considering is something that passes. People who purchase companion animals may sometimes do so on impulse, whether for themselves or for others like children, and they are often unaware of the needs of animals and not always prepared for the impact of an animal on their life. Animals bought on impulse might suffer from neglect at higher rates, and they're often abandoned or surrendered to shelters and rescues. This is traumatic for animals, obviously, but it also puts a further strain on the resources of local shelters and puts shelter workers in the heartbreaking position of having to deal with an influx of animals, in many cases having to euthanize those animals. Unlike pet stores, shelters and adoption agencies, which under your proposed option here for allowing the adoption of animals through pet shops, they often have screening procedures that help determine the suitability of a prospective home for different animals. And this is hugely beneficial both to the animals and also to the families that are considering adopting them. And this goes above and beyond what we typically see with pet shops. But I would also echo concerns by Ms. Hammers and Mr. Laidlaw that it's very important to restrict sales of animals like reptiles and birds and other exotic animals that are often kept as pets. And we commend you for including mention of other companion animals in your public consultation, because I think that's really important. If it includes all animals, all companion animals, it will be far stronger. My colleagues at World Animal Protection and ZooCheck have done extensive work to protect exotic animals from becoming victims of the pet trade, because they increasingly don't receive appropriate care because they're simply inappropriate candidates for being kept in captivity. These animals often suffer from poor welfare again due to commercial breeding, just like cats or dogs do. Oftentimes they're captured from the wild and imported into the country. And they're often available for adoption at humane societies and shelters as well, which could be a way to help find homes for those who are in need without introducing the commercial element. So I would say that the same arguments in favor of ending sales of cats and dogs and rabbits apply equally to other animals too. So we fully endorse Ms. Hammer's comments on the importance of using a positive list to address this concern. I will say just a couple of final words on some of the finer points. I think it would be important for you to implement any revisions to your bylaw in a reasonable time frame. Commercial vendors of animals via pet stores, they don't have large amounts of stock on hand because they get in young baby animals. So they don't have stock that they would need to sell off, which might suggest a longer phase-out period. So there is not a huge barrier to moving quickly, and we would suggest perhaps no more than about a year for this transition. And I also agree with Mr. Laidlaw's comments that your existing bylaw is very well drafted and could easily be amended to reflect these concerns. So I'll wrap it up there, but happy to answer any questions here or afterwards that you might have.